Hi, so this is 360 degrees again. And in the last segment, I mentioned that I was raised by socialists. So let me talk about that a little bit more before I go on to what happened to change my mind. So, my mother and my father had different views, but both considered themselves socialists. And in fact, my father, who is an economist, his mother considered herself socialist as well and worked to promote socialist ideas in America. She was born in Illinois in a Catholic family. She was the youngest of 15, and she fought for feminist and and socialist ideas for her whole life and raised my father in that way. My father, as I said, was an economist. He became an economist quite young and was an economist, is still an economist, has been an economist his whole life. He's in his 80s now and is still working, at least until the pandemic, was still working actively, if not still with graduate students. So he was obviously a little bit more tempered, and maybe not obviously, but he was not a Marxist. He had Marxist friends, Marxist economist friends like Bertel Ullman from NYU. But my father is more of a heterodox kind of economist. I used to think of him as post Keynesian. I guess he used to think of himself as post Keynesian. He considers himself now more Straffian. Straffa is another economist. And so he's heterodox left wing kind of, but not fully Marxist, not fully socialist. But when he was younger, he was. He very proudly worked with Joan Robinson, and he still tended towards many of the more socialist ideas. So when I began to question socialism, I saw my father as potentially on the wrong side of things. And he wrote me a 10-page letter going into detail about the socialists in my family and how I was going against our family and generations of thought by being a libertarian. He was very, very anti-libertarian and took it quite personally, I think, when I became libertarian. So I would still put him in that camp for that reason, in that sense, even though he's not Marxist. My mother, well, I remember after my parents divorced, she had a roommate. In New York, it's very expensive, so you might need a roommate in order to have an apartment, and especially given the messy divorce. But I won't go into that. But so my mother would fight her roommate on the grounds that her roommate was Stalinist, and my mother was against that because she was Leninist. And she saw this as obviously much more reasonable. And at the time, so did I. And, arguably it is, because who would be Stalinist? But who would be Leninist in this day and age, really? I mean, Lenin also did some pretty bad things and attempted to implement full communism with no money, no currency in the economic system. And that caused, well, it caused a lot of hardship and death. And that wasn't the only thing bad he did. And he created a secret police and so on and so forth. And really, it makes me laugh to think about it. It certainly made me laugh and also cry at the beginning when I realized this is what I had been taught. When I started to see the problems and the horrors of the socialist Soviet Union. And just as a side note, there are a lot of connections to Russia in my family, both on my mother's and my father's side. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was actually born in the early days of the Bolshevik regime and actually had to flee the Bolsheviks. And yet my mother was a Leninist. Her mother was fleeing Lenin, and yet she became a Leninist. This is how powerful the ideology was and is for many people. And on my father's side, my brothers also have a connection to Russia. There's a lot of connections to Russia. So that was partly why I started to look at the Soviet Union as the example of socialism. I mean, obviously, it was also the biggest experiment with it, and it was a natural choice, but also because of those connections to Russia. So how did this come about? How did I decide to start questioning socialism? Well, basically, in short, it was 9/11. when 9/11 happened, I was working already as a programmer. I had learned the skill and began to have jobs in programming during this dot-com era a couple of years earlier. And I was headed to work on 8th Avenue and 14th Street. And I was walking from the train station and I looked down 6th Avenue and you can see straight down to the World Trade Center. And uh, I, I saw it. I had been on the train and had heard someone say a plane hit the building when I was on the train. And I imagined some little two-seater private jet going into a barn, you know? But people had been talking about it, so I'd heard something. But then I saw literally down 6th Avenue, I saw the burning of the first building, and I saw with my own eyes this plane hit the second building. So it just completely turned my world upside down. Before that, I thought the United States was this powerful empire and nothing could touch it. And it was a feeling as much as a understanding or a theory about the US government. But I just could not believe that some little band of terrorists could actually do this to America. And that revealed, as I started to see that really that is what happened, that revealed to me how little I actually knew. Not only how little I knew about the government, the whole setup, but also, you know, the vulnerabilities, the foreign policy, the, you know, reasons people would have to want to inflict such terror, the idea of terrorists. I didn't really even understand or hadn't heard anything about, you know, terrorists and why they would hate America and everything. Like, I knew America was this evil empire in a sense, you know, this sort of socialist appropriation of that idea. You know, the during the Cold War, obviously we called, you know, Reagan called the Soviet Union the evil empire, but in a sense, those who were raised kind of in a more socialist point of view almost had the flip, you know, that flipped over where they saw America as this evil empire. And in many ways, America was an empire in terms of, you know, maybe not in the traditional sense, but in terms of having troops overseas and so forth, and you know, having expanded first across its own country and also beyond. So anyway, I had a mixture of obviously being raised with American schooling, some of it a bit hippie alternative schooling, but much of it regular schooling. So, you know, the history that I was taught was the same as most American kids. But then the influence of my parents and friends of the family and everything was you know, different. But this mixture was still, it wasn't very well grounded. I didn't have a lot of great understanding of why I believed the things I believed. I just know what I was taught. So when this happened and exposed to me my own ignorance, I decided I needed to learn more. I needed to go back to university. I had done some university and then sort of left and went into the job market. I decided to go back to university. I wanted originally to learn science. I ended up getting caught up in economics and history, and that will be the subject of the next segment.